Everybody to this very special evening. The name Washington, by the way, has special meaning to me because when we lived in Washington Heights, we lived on Fort Washington Avenue. And in the days that I lived on Fort Washington Avenue, I wouldn't have dared walk on Washington Avenue that Rabbi Rakefet speaks about in his early life. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Michael Fishberger and Aaron Kohlberg from Geffen, who are here tonight, the publishers together with OU Press from Washington Avenue to Rehoboth, Washington. And they're in the back, and following the evening's program, as you go towards the back, on your right, my left, there is water, and on my right, there are books. And Rabbi Rakefet will be very happy to sign books if you buy them. I recommend that you do. How many of you already have? Wonderful. And it's going into the third printing, right? Into the third printing. So if you have not as yet gotten your copy, please get it tonight. Tonight it's being sold at a reduced price. I'd also like to recognize the presence of the person who's responsible for most of the programs that we have at the Great Synagogue, our board chairman, Asher Shapiro. Now, everyone has on your seat a copy of upcoming programs at the Jerusalem Great Synagogue. I'd like to call your attention just to the fact that for those of you who would like to join us for Slichot this Motzei Shabbat at 10:30, we are going to be privileged to hear Divrei Torah from the Rav Rashi Yisrael, the Rishon LeZion, or Rav Shlomo Moshe Amar Shlita, and immediately thereafter, our chief Chazan, Chaim Adler, accompanied by our choir, conducted by Eli Yaffe, will officiate for Slichot, and everyone is cordially invited to attend. There are a number of other very interesting programs, but there's one that we simply put the date, and at the time that this was written several days ago. This evening is a very special evening, and I don't want to take any time from our speakers to introduce Rabbi Rakefet and to say a few words of opening. It's my pleasure to call upon a person who embodies Torah, Avoda, and Gemilut Chasadim, a woman who was a role model for so many people from Yeshiva University during my days, people from Yeshiva Har Etzion, and people from throughout Eretz Yisrael today. It is my pleasure to call upon Dr. Tova Lichtenstein.
Good evening. It is indeed a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor for me to have been asked to introduce Rabbi Rakefet. This evening of tribute to Rabbi Aaron Rakefet on the occasion of the publication of his autobiography, From Washington Avenue to Washington Street, is an occasion to thank the author for being our tour guide as we look back at the past and remind ourselves, those of us who are his contemporaries, and I see many of them here, of New York of our youth, and assess the change the years have brought. Rabbi Rakefet has indeed done a service by recording accurately his milieu, the schooling he received, the youth movement he attended, the yeshivas in which he studied, the rabbinate that he served, the schools where he has taught, the causes he has served, to name just a few of his experiences. He has indeed lived in interesting times, has met interesting people, and has been part of the revival of Jewish religious life in the United States, the development of educational institutions in Israel, and the struggle for Soviet Jewry. I, however, tonight want to focus not on the times, but on the man whom we honor. The autobiography starts with a description of Ani Rothkoff's Pidyon Haben, and I'm quoting from the book. The Kohen was Rabbi Jacob Meskin, the spiritual leader of Beit HaMedrash HaGadol of the Bronx. He was the author of several volumes of rabbinic scholarship. My Zaidi, writes our author, often grumbled about the rabbis leaving early and not participating in the meal. I can well understand, he says, why the rabbi conducted himself in this fashion. He probably looked around at the clan assembled in my parents' house for the event and concluded they were not his type. Our author does not spell out what Rabbi Meskin saw, but one can infer from the little he does say that Rabbi Meskin might have felt uncomfortable that day. The Rothkoffs lived at 2115 Washington Avenue, a mixed neighborhood of Irish, Italian, and first-generation Jews, first-generation born in America Jews, not first-generation Jews, few of whom were Sabbath observers. Although it is never specifically stated in the book, it seems to me that one of the prime movers in the drama that unfolds in this book is Ani Zeder, the one who took umbrage at the rabbi's brief stay. Zaidi Rothkoff worked as a baker at Pechter's, was comfortable only when speaking Yiddish. And in a telling description, the Zaidi is described as one who remained, and I emphasize that, observant, and quote, I was to accompany him to shul every Sabbath. Zaidi Rothkoff took pride in his grandson, and rightfully so, took him to Pechter's to show off the lad's Jewish knowledge, and in a scene that illustrates both the Zaidi's pride and Ani's first steps as a Jew, and the general feeling of the older generation that there was little chance of the young following in their footsteps, our author writes, occasionally, I would accompany him being Zaidi, to Pechter's where he worked the night shift. He would proudly introduce me to his foreman, who was a most imposing figure in Zaidi's world. I would recite the Shema Yisrael prayer, and tears would moisten the foreman's eyes. And yet one wonders, how did young Ani learn his prayers? How many children growing up on Washington Street in 1940 knew the Shema? Ani started PS 59, the day after Rosh Hashanah 1942, but his career at PS 59 was to be of short duration. His first grade teacher, Ann Trinor, of unspecified religion, you must really let us know, recognized that this child did not belong in her class and suggested that the Rothkoffs send their firstborn to what was known then as a Jewish parochial school. To the younger ones among you in the audience, the word day school came much, much later. Trainer's words, says our author, sparked my mother. If I were to transfer to Salanta, however, my parents would face the additional burden of private school tuition. Money was not overflowing on Washington Avenue, and a postman's salary did not brighten the economic reality. The Salanta administration negotiated a tuition of $5 a month with my parents. And thus began the religious development of Arnold Rothkoff. After Yeshiva Salanta, not the Bronx High School of Science, that school that all bright children aspired to attend, but Talmudical Academy. And by the time he graduated, The valedictory address, delivered by Arnold Rothkoff, was one of commitment and mission. He charged his classmates, quote, "We must become the guardians of American Jewry. While so many of our brethren have forsaken the holy crown of Torah here in America, we have remained loyal defenders of our noble heritage." Our valedictorian charged his classmates and himself, and he has indeed met the challenge that he himself posed. Rabbi Aaron Rakefet's story is the story of the renaissance of Yiddishkeit in the United States, of the Oleh who came to Israel and continued to be not only a loyal defender, but a proud presenter of our noble heritage. It is a story of Torah, a story of Zionism and devotion and dedication. I am honored to present to you Rabbi Aaron Rakefet.
I want to thank Dr. Tova Lichtenstein. Her words both strengthen me and honor me. We go back a long time. We know each other. I let Tova in on a little story that she may not know. I don't want to tell you how many years ago in honor of the feminine mystique. We'll just say a few years ago. If you recall when you sat in on your father's shayurim that year, so you should know in advance, we used to hustle into the room and grab, the seats where everyone reserved a seat. There were two types of seats. There were those, the brave ones, who were in the line of fire up front, and then there were the ones who wanted the seats in back so they could duck, and your father's eyes should not catch them. But we never touched your chair. We always used to say, that chair is for Tova, and I can tell you until today exactly where you sat, right near the second door to the room. Right on that side, next to the second door. So be aware, we were cognizant, even at that moment, of a wonderful role model. I've just come back from many, many weeks of touring from the West Coast to the East Coast, numerous book launches, some with books, some without books. And in the States, I spoke about essentially Am Yisrael and Medinat Yisrael. This evening, I want to talk and share with you my feelings as we stand this moment before Yom Norayin. We make a cheshbon hanefesh, and I don't want to talk what's in the book, that you can read, but rather a message or two that I hope you will derive from the book. And of course, as always, I begin by quoting my Rebbe whenever I say my Rebbe, Mori or Rebbe Rav Soloveitchik. The Rav gave a magnificent shir, must be back in the 50s, and he quoted from the Rambam's introduction to the Mishnah Torah. And the Rambam, right towards the start, Afal Pi Shal Nichtav Al Shabal Per, even though the Torah Shabal Per, the oral Torah, could not be written down, Moshe Rabbeinu taught it to the 70 elders. And then the Rambam lists out 3 students, Elazar, Pinchas, V'Yehoshua, Shloshtam, Kibrumi, Moshe. 3 great students, 3 outstanding students. And the Rambam could have left off there and gone further to the next generation. And instead, the Rambam tells us, Uli Yehoshua, he singles him out, Shekul Tamid El Shel Moshe Rabbeinu, Masa Torah Shel Ba'al Peh, V'tzivo Aleha, V'chein Yehoshua Kol Yemei Chayav, Lamad Al Peh. And the Rambam singles out one time that was unique, Yehoshua, and the Masorah, the tradition, passes through Yehoshua. Now, Mori Rebbe asked, what was so different about Yehoshua? Azar, Pinchas, Kohanim, what were they lacking? But Rebbe explained that there's more than just learning. Our heritage, our tradition certainly the basis of learning, understanding, knowledge. But there's also a tradition of lifestyle, of Masorah, the way Jews live, the way we practice our Torah, the way we encounter the Almighty, the way we interact with other Jews and the general population in the world. And what made Yeshua so special, he didn't just study with Moshe Rabbeinu, but he watched him. He studied him. He wouldn't let go of his Rebbe. He followed him. He went way beyond the formal study. And Yeshua was Zeicha, was privileged. He became the Talmud Mufak, and through him, our Masorah passes on. I have to tell you, being in America was very upsetting at times. I saw a swing to the right and a swing to the left. And in my humble opinion, both approaches negated our Masorah, our tradition, that which we're so responsible for and receiving from our Rebbe and passing on to the next generation. I have this line in the book, and I've told it to my students innumerable times. Rabbi Shalom created a Rebbe with 2 ears. With 1 ear, he has to hear his Rebbe 50 years ago. And with the other ear, he has to hear his Talmidim speaking 50 years hence. And a good Rebbe will be proud if what he heard 50 years ago and what his Talmud speaks about 50 years from now correspond, interlock. And let me tell you, what do I mean? Let's begin with the swing to the right. I have to be honest, the swing to the right bothers me less than the swing to the left, but nevertheless, it is not Masorah. You know, I arrived in America. There once was a time, I'll apologize to those who are not Americans, they won't understand me fully, but there was once a time we got off the plane, we're back in America, the first question was, is Shmuel Bernstein's okay? Kosher, not kosher, can you eat there? If you recall what went on over the decades. Today, I'm told in America, and I was all over, I was amazed, out in the coast, you could get some mixed baked goods. I was amazed when they explained to me how it goes all over America. There's a distributor in Minneapolis. Any good product out of the greater New York area is available coast to coast. And then I heard that Zamex doesn't make, and I didn't see this with my own eyes, but I was told they no longer make strawberry shortcake. They make cake and whipped cream, but they will not put the strawberries in. So very naively, I asked why. They told me that there are insects on the strawberries. I said, I saw Gedolei Yisrael eating strawberries. There's a way to clean strawberries. I don't have to go into details. You cut off the green, you wash it. B'Bani Shalom, I look at a strawberry. I don't see anything. Oh no, you gotta look under a magnifying glass. And if I didn't want to believe them, there's someone who drops off old dishes of Bamishpacha in the Gris Kolel office. I think it's done to create atmos nefesh for me. Some of the articles are great, and some of the, I was reading, I couldn't believe my eyes. Strawberries, you have to use a magnifying glass. Now, I don't understand the Sachcha, but you believe in Chassidish world, the Avnei Neser of Avram Bornstein already dealt with this problem 140 years ago. Lo nitna Torah Malachei Hashem. I don't want to go into all the love this. But Rebbeinu Shalom, Kohanim finished the Avodah. They don't have to strip naked. Either wearing Bigdei Kohanim, the Avodah is over. But Chazal already say he goes to the Meltachai, he goes to the side rooms where he changes his clothes. Lo nitna Torah Malachei Hashem. Rebbeinu Shalom, what are we fruma than our rebellion? And this is one example, but I'll give you an example that began here. And I see in America, and I was just, I couldn't, how did it begin? How did Rabbanim allow this to happen? You're not allowed to mention a woman's first name. Have you seen this? I mean, first of all, it's frightening. It makes a statement. I don't want to say what it says about men. But have you seen the Haredi press? Every engagement, every wedding, the name of the chassan and all that is said, and then he's marrying the daughter of. No mention of the Kala's name. Well, I want to tell you, Vanu was written by Mrs. Meiselman. It also circulates on the websites. There's a Xerox, a photograph, a reproduction of the invitation to Reb Moshe Soloveitchik's wedding to Rebbetzin Pesha Feinstein. And if you look at that invitation, Reb Chaim Brisker's name is exactly the same size as that of his wife, Rivka. The name of the Kala, her first name, Peshke, is exactly the same size in print as the name of Reb Moshe. And if you take this chumrah seriously, and I have to tell you, once it begins and Das Torah and all that follows, Ribono Shel Olam, my dear friends, we have to stop reading the Chumash on Shabbos morning. Sarah Rivka, Rachel Leah, etc., etc. So I have to tell you, that swing to the right, that's not Masorah, that's not Yiddishkeit. Joshua saw what Moshe Rabbeinu did. We have to watch the earlier generation. But what's more frightening to me is, and this is among my own students, have you heard the concept they have developed? A partnership meeting. It began here in Yerushalayim, Shira Chakasha. It began simultaneously or concomitantly on the west side of New York, one of the prayer groups in the... Help,
Okay, wait a minute.
Cheers.
Yes, how are you?
Monty, are you okay? Do me a favor, put two chairs together, let's be safe.
No, isn't this chair? Get one of those little chairs. Who is that?
It's Monty Mishnah. We're classmates from Sri Lanka. Monty, are you okay? I'm here to continue? Thank you. Partnership Minyanim. A woman leads the Kabbalat Shabbat, where you don't have Baruch, you don't have Kaddish, Chatzi Kaddish for the Chazan. In the morning she leads the Psukei de Zimra, coined the word for it. It already exists in Beersheba, so I brought it there. And I'm asked, what's my opinion? My opinion, very simply, it's conservative Judaism. More than that, a former student of Bris Kollel wrote an op-ed piece. I quote it. It went all over the United States. We put women in a cage. We put women in a cage. I don't know. I've davened in many shuls all over the world, from Australia to Russia to South Africa to England to Canada, coast to coast in America. I never yet saw women in a cage. What's he talking about? And then the Shaloah Sani Isha became such a major issue. We're embarrassing women. I want to ask a simple question. Mori Rebbe said the Seder HaBrachot. Reb Moshe Feinstein said the Seder HaBrachot. The Gerer Rebbe, the Belzer Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. What are we talking about here? And I don't even want to go into a discourse. It has to do, it's based upon a Gemara Menachah. It has to do that men have more mitzvah than women, and actually that's a slap in a man's face that he needs more mitzvah to tame him. But I'll tell you, on a popular level, Shaloah Sani Yisha, there's no bracha, I say, with more feeling than Shaloah Sani Yisha, because if men had to give birth, none of us would be sitting here. You just think about it. Shalom Asanish. And turned it into a tirade. And this is Masola. Where are you going? Where are you at? And one other student joined the battle from Chicago. And this was a student, not only mine, not only Chris Colwell, but he carried Rabbi Soloveitchik on his hands when he studied with Rabbi at the yeshiva in the 1990s. And it's, to me, frightening. It's not enough to have knowledge, but one has to know the boundaries. As I've said so many times, and I think I have this line in the book, Torah, it's like a beautiful picture that each one of us has to paint. The picture is very individualistic. Each one's picture is different. But around the picture is a frame. And that frame is the Ba'at Hashem Zu Halacha. And the frame has to remain constant. There is much free choice. Be a Litvak, Chassid, and a Yeki, and you can combine them, and you can be all of them, and a Mizrachist, and an Akudist. Hashtiya Kedat Ein Ones. But the framework has to be solid. And I hope that this scholarly memoir that I was privileged to write and work on for 11 years, from the time my 2 volumes on the Rav appeared, and this scholarly memoir is a direct result of my research on the Rav. I have to acknowledge a young man who came in Aliyah shortly after we did, a graduate of Yeshiva University, a graduate of Keren B'Yafna, today a professor at Hebrew U, Shaul Stampfer, did a brilliant doctorate essentially on Volozhin Yeshiva at the Hebrew University. It's a doctorate that had to come out a second time revised because the archives of the Soviet Union, the secret police, were opened up to the public after the fall of communism. And he had to revise an entire chapter, many pages, on why the Volozhin Yeshiva was closed. It's a brilliant doctorate. And I researched it, and I cited in my work on the Rav. But I said to myself, what is Shaul's work based upon? Memoir literature. No one has done a memoir of the period in which I grew up, where I studied, the Gedolei Israel that I was privileged to know. And that gave birth to this research and the ultimate value, Washington to Washington. So I hope you get the feeling of Masorah. I was privileged to see so many Gedolei Israel. I don't say I'm a clone. My Rebbe never allowed us to think in those terms. I don't say I mimic them and ape them. I express myself. But the framework is the Ba Hashem. Chas v'chalila, we should tamper with it. Look at the conservative movement, 1911, when conservative rabbis, and this I know from my own research, my postdoctoral research, when conservative graduates of JTS would come into Orthodox synagogues and speak in perfect English, unlike the rabbis who could only speak Yiddish, the Rabbanim could only speak Yiddish, and the young rabbis would say, if you will elect me rabbi, we will bring the women next to the men. It's about time we got rid of that fence that separates. Virginia Slims can smoke in public today, and there's no reason why women have to be behind that so-called mechitza. And so many Orthodox shuls went the way of all flesh. 100 years later, where are they? Women in cages. How do you speak that way? And 4 or 5 rabbis, among them students of mine, signed on that the original rabbi from LA is correct. But let me go one step further and deal with another thought that I want to accentuate. And it's a sad thought. But let me begin with Divrei Torah, once again, Mori Rebbe. in the 50s, I believe it was, the Rav gave a fabulous Yortzeit shiur. Now, you all recall the Rav used to give halacha and agata, how he had the energy to speak for 4.5, 5 hours. The longest shiur I ever gave was a 3-hour hesed for Joe DiMaggio. That's the longest shiur I ever gave, and unfortunately, it's the shiur that everyone knows me by. Even in Lakewood, and I don't have to tell you, in Satmar, in Square, everyone remarked the shiur on Joe DiMaggio. All right, I admit it was Geneva Dot. The title said one thing and the shiur said another, but it caught attention. How the Rav had the energy, I don't know. And let me also confess, at that age, in the 50s, I loved the halacha. I understood the halacha. The agata was behind me. Couldn't appreciate it. You grow older. Wow, the agata. Overwhelming how a human being could rise to such heights of life and Torah, philosophy, agada, homiletics, interacting so beautifully. And Rebbe touched upon the Yerushalmi in Kedushin at the end of the first parak, tells a remarkable story about Rebbe Tafin. What's the story? That Rebbe Tafin's kibbud aviyim was beyond description. One time on Shabbos, his mother was walking, and you all know women wear fancy shoes. It evidently didn't begin today, but even at the time of Chazal, women had fancy shoes. So she's walking, and the shoe is all laced, and suddenly it rips, and Rabbi Tafin understands his mother can no longer walk on these shoes, and he puts his hands on the floor, and she takes a step onto his hand, moves the hands until she gets home. What kibbud aviyim. And then the Gemara says he was very sick. And he was very sick. And she came into the Beit Medrash, being mitpalel for my son, Rebbe Tafin. He has done so much in kibbud aviyim, leman yerichi yamecha. How can God take him at a young age? And the Chachamim asked her, what did he do? What do you mean he did a lot? What did he do? And he answered. She answered. She told the story with the hands, with the mother, what he did for her. And the Chachamim said, if that's what he did, he didn't even do 1/1,000,000th of kibbud aviyim. And the Rav asked the obvious question. What do you mean he didn't do 1/1,000,000th? This is fabulous what he did. Give him credit. Why do you put him down? And the Rav gave a remarkable answer. Everyone in life, the Ribbon Shalom created us. We have a shlichut. We have a message. We have a goal. There is something that we have to achieve. This is why we were placed in the world. The minute we achieve what the Ribbon Shalom wanted out of us, then he can call us in. Our journey is over. When the Chachamim heard what he did, they said to her, maybe she's right. Maybe Rabbi Tafin's role was not to be the great Rabbi Tafin, not to be the great teacher of Torah, but his role was kibbud aviyim. If this is the case and he fulfilled it, chas v'chalila, he'll be taken away. And they screamed, no, he didn't fulfill anything. This is 1/1,000,000th. He has so much more to go. Let him live. And at that Yortzeit shiur, and later I heard it via recordings, the Rav quoted Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Cook. He didn't quote Rav Cook often, but this thought he quoted a number of times that I heard from Rav Cook. A fabulous thought. I made it the quote from him gesagt when we spoke ancient Chinese. And in the vidui on Yom Kippur, look what we say. Elokai ad shalom natsati eini kedai. Before I was born, I was worthless. I was of no value. And the Rav, quoting Rav Kook, asked a simple question. What do you mean you were no value? Obviously, before you were born, you can't action, you can't act, you can't function, you're not in this world, you're not a human being. What does it mean? Ad shalom natsati einu kedai. And Rav Kook gave a brilliant interpretation that everyone is born at a certain time, in a certain framework, in a certain milieu. You know why? Because he will be successful. Had he been born 100 years ago, he would not be successful. And Rav Kook interpreted, Ad shalom atzati, had I been created at a different time, Eini Kedai, I would not have succeeded. But the fact that I was created here, now, in this context, in this configuration, I can succeed. I'm on the world for a purpose. I have a shlichut, and Be'ezrat Hashem, I will discharge and fulfill this shlichut. And I want to tell you, people often say Hitler killed 6 million. It's not enough to say that. Yimach Shmo v'Zichro. Hitler killed 6 million and destroyed the lives of another 4 to 5 million. Essentially, anyone who went through the inferno did not come out totally intact. And this was one of the saddest parts of my life. I had wonderful Rabbeim from a very early age. Today, lo aleinu, we hear of scandals with teachers, Rabbeim, Machanchim. I don't know where it's coming from. Someone who studies Torah, it has to purify you. Again, it's the Masorah. It has to take your body and cleanse you. I once heard a meritic vod from the Rav, where he said, why do the prophets compare Torah to water? Why? What does Torah have to do with water? But the Rav said, Torah, you learn so much, you forget. But it's like going to a mikveh. You dry yourself off when you come out of the mikveh. You're no longer wet, but the purity remains. Similarly, Torah, certainly you forget, but the purity, the tahara, the commitment, the begebenkeit remains. And I don't know what has happened, but at a young age, my 7th grade Rabbi was Rav Gershon Yankelovich, part of the Shanghai crowd. My 8th grade Rabbi was Rav Henrik Fishman. Later I had Rav Noach Bornstein, Rabbi Ruchel Gerelik, Rav Shmuel Eliezer Volk, and I knew them intimately. They all lived in the Bronx. I was in their homes. I knew their wives. I knew their children. I watched them. I observed them like Yehoshua observing Moshe Rabbeinu. And at times, it was so sad. And I can tell you in retrospect, I was zoiche lechavin to the words of the Brisker Rav Velvel. For decades, I would ask my students, you gentlemen, these are the best kids out of YU, Chris Colwell, the finest of the finest. Some of them are sitting here. I'm proud of them. I am overwhelming. What a schut to teach them. They made me much smarter than I should have been by their questions, by their insight. They challenged me, the Gemara and Tainik mi Talmidai, Yotem Kulam. And I would say to them, "No, how many of you heard of Reb Noach Bornstein?" Not one hand goes up. Oh, I know Shmuel, yeah, that's his son. Suddenly Reb Noach Bornstein was the greatest Talmud the Brisker Rav had. And look in America. Verschwunden. A new country, a new language, a new culture. Go and live with it. Go a greenhorn. And then, many years after I first said this, a Haredi biography on the Brisker Rav, it was just completed by Mellor. I think it was the 2nd volume. And I'm reading it, I couldn't believe my eyes. A delegation from American rabbis came to see the Brisker Rav, and the Brisker Rav thundered at them, what's fun? And then they go, what the heck do you have in America? My greatest Talmud went to America, Rav Noach Bornstein, and had nicht a word from him, and you don't hear a word about him. And what a tragedy. Rabbi Yeruchim Gerelik, I have legendary stories. 2 stories are in the book, but Rabbi Yeruchim Gerelik, unbelievable what he would have been in his normal habitat, in his regular environment, and the struggles with America. I remember Rabbi Noach Bunchton once said to me, Rabbi Yeruchim Gerelik lebt da, wie hat gelebt in Europe, that Rabbi Gerelik was here exactly the way he lived in Rotten. The only thing he does, he allows his wife to shop in Alexander's. That's the new generation, new Alexander's. But the only thing he does, I have it in the book, he allows his wife to shop in Alexander's. But let me tell you, when Shmuel lays a Volk with frustration, here was a going from Terush. Here was a chavruta of Rabbi Azriel Rabinovich would have been, he was later killed by Hitler. Rabbi Azriel was the son of Rabbi Chaim Rabinovich, the Pelza Rosh Yeshiva, Gedolei Israel. And take a look at America. I remember one time Rav Volk is giving a shir and he's quoting Reb Chaim, and then he thunders at me, Rothkoff, who do I mean when I say Reb Chaim? And I very innocently answer, Reb Chaim Briska. I answer, Reb Chaim Briska? The school, the walls started shaking. There was a hole in the ceiling. Reb Chaim Briska, Fasimidai. Reb Chaim Kelja, Reb Chaim Rabinovich. It took me 50 years, but I once gave a shir in the Kollel, Mabein Reb Chaim Soloveitchik to Reb Chaim Rabinovich. But you think of Rav Volk, what would have been and what became, and you're so sad. And this was a result of Hitler. Don't speak not only of the 6 million Utshu murdered, but even those who survived, the scars, the tragedy, the lack of adjustment, being plucked against your will and placed in an alien culture. We who have come in Aliyah are fortunate. We came out of our own free will. Many came with me. The majority went back. You didn't make it. You had a choice. You could go back. We had another advantage, that this is a country of Olim. Very few people came on the Mayflower in the state of Israel. Baruch Hashem, the most they can boast about is that they fought in the Palmach. All right, I can boast about, as you see in the book, my experience in the army, and you know they say a good word on the streets. The shorter the service in the army, the more stories you have to tell. V'dai l'chakima v'remisa. So you see, this is another message that you feel that should come across. So let me reiterate, and then let me conclude. I want to thank Dr. Tova Lichtenstein for honoring me with her presence and with her very moving words of introduction. I do admit that the opening of the book with Rabbi Meskin running away and my later teaching his great-granddaughter in Yerushalayim HaKodesh is worthy of a best-selling novel. I hope the book will have that sort of reception. We spoke about 2 ideas. I don't want to talk about Am Yisrael, there's so much to say, but I think if you're living here, you comprehend what Am Yisrael is about. It certainly comes across from my chapters on the army and Russia and the missing in action 1982. To talk about Medinat Yisrael, we are committed, we are here in America, we can talk and sing and dance. Baruch Hashem, the Jews are still content, but we have to be Moidel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There is a constant aliyah of the finest youth imaginable. I need not go further than this week's newspapers, that couple that came on America with the little baby, the story behind it, the girl who is so ill and only wants to become an Israeli citizen. I don't want to say anything further. Alavai, she should have a refuah shlema. Mi kamcha Yisrael, do yachad ba'aretz. It's overwhelming. I'm very proud of my students who have come in Aliyah. And to quote Rakefet, America gives us its Trumat and Meister. We get the best, the very best that come here. Baruch Hashem. I also spoke about the shlichut, what God wants out of us, and our role, and the sad part when the shlichut is aborted, when the shlichut is canceled, when the shlichut is negated, and suddenly you find yourself in surroundings that were not yours. Ad shalom notzati, eino kedai, and suddenly you're back, hi'ilu lo notzata, and believe me, eino kedai. I want to thank Rabbi Finkelstein, and I want to thank as well Mrs. Toby Willick, who initiated this book launch. It makes me very happy because I must share with you my inner thoughts. I was very ashamed that there were book launches in Los Angeles, Seattle, Toronto, Flatbush, Lawrence, New York, Baltimore, and not yet a book launch in Jerusalem. So as far as the record is concerned, all those book launches were pseudo-book launches, and this Yerushalayim HaKodesh is the real book launch. I have to express my thanks to the OU and tell you a little story of Hashgacha Pratit. When the manuscript was about 80% complete, I started to show it around, and among the people I showed it to is my student, Rabbi Moshe Kripke, Vice President of Academic Affairs of Touro College, and he said to me, "You got to take this to the OU. They just hired a young man to head up their publication department by the name of Rabbi Gil's student." Rabbi Gil's student, who's a genius with his hand and his ability and his knowledge, he gave up his own publishing house. Some of you read his blog. He also happens to be an actuary. Worked for the OU exactly 2 years. From the day I brought him the manuscript, the day that Geffen started publishing was the day he announced his resignation. He had his family has to go out and make a living, so he had to leave and take on a job as an actuary. I also have to thank Rabbi Student for choosing Geffen as his partner in publication. I am overwhelmed by the finished product, by the beauty of it, by their editorial staff, by their editors, their copyists, by their photography work. It's on what we used to say when I came in Aliyah, a level of export. It equals anything in the United States and England or in the civilized world. We're the equal and even better. And finally, let me end off with a few words about the pictures. The cynics have already told me that, can they close the door back? Okay. Thank you to my grandson, and they open it a minute later.
Can't wait to get the book.
I want to say a few words about the pictures. The cynics have already told me that the pictures are more than worth the price of the book, and I hate to say it, I agree with them. And again, Geffen did a beautiful job. There are certain pictures I insisted be full page, and it's all on proper paper. Unlike earlier books of mine where beautiful portraits were not published on proper paper, the publisher was worried, well, how many copies will he sell? 1,000? It wound up that of those 2 volumes, he's already sold over 8,000. The picture that people have bothered me the most, and I've already given permission to 2 sources to copy it and use it, is the picture of the Rav giving shir in 1957. Everyone tells me it's the greatest picture to survive of the Rav in the middle of the shir. The story behind that picture is as follows. Mori Rebbe was the last Yotzai shir in the base medrash. A year later, due to the demands of the fire department, the crowd was too large. It was a fire hazard. They had to move the shir into Lamport. bunch of us got together, said, we're going to sit on the side, we were little kids, we're going to take a picture at the high point. And we got the picture right where the Rav with his finger in the air, the crowd around him. Now, in that picture, I'm setting a challenge for you. Rabbi Soloveitchik is in that picture, and Rabbi Lichtenstein is in that picture. See if you can find them. That picture was lost. I didn't know what happened to it. When we moved my mother into assisted living, she should live and be well, a few years ago, we cleaned out the apartment, and I found the picture. And Geffen worked on it, and it's a beautiful picture. The other picture that has created much attention, and Chabad has declared me a hero, and they interviewed me and videoed me, but I have to tell you, I check in advance with my students in Chabad that it's not Messianics. These are normative Chabadniks, Baruch Hashem. So that picture is very fascinating. Chabad had this picture of the two Rebbeim, the sixth Rebbe, his son-in-law Rabbi Shmayahu Guraye, and his young little son-in-law sitting there, Rabbi Nachman Mendel Schneerson. Sitting at the front is a young rabbi with a black beard. No one knew who that was. When my work on the Rav appeared, someone in the Chabad archives saw my work, saw my pictures of the Rav, and I have a picture of the Rav, 1939. They looked at the 39 picture with the 42 picture and identified the Rav. And that's how you have that picture of the two Rebbeim and the Rav sitting together. It is an historic moment in time. Another picture that has a fascinating background is, I was giving a lecture, it's being recorded, and I mentioned that when I studied with the Rav, he was, to me, over 6 foot. So someone listening, a rabbi, I taught his children, a rabbi in New Jersey, much younger than I am. He knew the Rav in the 70s. So he wrote a review of my scholarship, and he says, but in one lecture, Rabbi Rakefet stated that the Rav was over 6 foot. Rabbi Rakefet looked up to the Rav spiritually. That's why he looked up to him physically. The Rav was no more than, he says, 5'9", 5'10". All right, I didn't get excited. Suddenly, I get a phone call, and I come back to the strawberries and the cake and the whipped cream, a grandson of Zamnik, the founder of the bakery. And this young man calls me and he says, Rebbe, you're absolutely right, and I can prove it. So what do you mean you can prove it? My grandfather on the other side, via his mother, not Zamnik, but the other grandfather was Rabbi Teddy Adams. Look, how many of you grew up in the Ohel Tzedek Shul on the west side? Teddy Adams was a linebacker. There are no two ways about how tall he was. And he says, I have a picture of the Rav with Rabbi Adams, with Rabbi Chaim coming in the middle. And I'm sending it to you by FedEx. A day and a half later, I have the picture. I couldn't believe my eyes. The Rav was taller than I thought he was because he's right there. Look at the picture with Teddy Adams. So it's not the end of the world. I told the Zamnik youngster, I said, don't get so excited. Someone can criticize me for that. All right, so the Rav was 5'10", and I thought he was 6'1". So what? But to him it was Yehorig V'al Yavar. And he sent me the picture. I want to comment just on 2 more pictures. I think the most important picture in the book is probably one that you didn't notice. It's partially the saga of the Jewish people. Some of you know that Malka and I were privileged to work for the branch of the Mossad that dealt with the Jews in Russia. Some of you I sent to Russia sitting here. Some of you were my victims or my silent soldiers. We couldn't boast about it. We couldn't talk about it. Of course, today the security clause is lifted. One of the most famous refugee families was the Fratkin family in Leningrad. I can tell you it was the only family in Leningrad that never was Mechalel Shabbos. World War II, the communist regime, Chabadnikim from the home, Gevarna, Nish Gevarna. And they raised 2 children, groom children, under these conditions. Their younger child was Fanya Fratkin. Some tourist, quote unquote, walked into the house and she had just awakened, took a picture, and there's a very sour-faced little Fanya looking, and Triple SJ turned that into their most famous poster. Fanya Fradkin isn't smiling, neither are Russia's other 2,999,999 Jews. Let my people go. And there's a big picture of Fanya underneath student struggle for Soviet Jewry. I was privileged to take a picture of Fanya holding that poster in the Merkaz Klita in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. And I consider that picture by far the one that gives us such a basic lesson. But finally, before we have the honor of hearing a dear friend, colleague, former prisoner of Zion, Yosef Mendelovich, I just want to mention one more picture, and perhaps it's a beautiful way to introduce Reb Yosef. I came to Leningrad in 1981, and on the inside of the house, on the door was a poster, Am Yisrael Chai. And that poster was painted by a kid who came from Odessa, who was told that you can get a little bit about Yiddishkeit in Leningrad. There's still a Chabad presence there, despite the communists. And that kid came, he's a big Chabadnik today. And he drew that poster. And I photographed it. And everyone looks at it and says the kid made a mistake. Am is without a final mem. Look in the book. It is a normal mem, not the final mem. And I realized this kid didn't make a mistake at all. Am Yisrael Chai. With all our tzaras, with all our distress, with all that we have gone through, with all the assimilation and the intermarriage and the reform, and all the challenges we have faced, Baruch Hashem, we have over 2 million Shomer Shabbos Jews at least today, and it grows stronger every moment. And who represents this better than a young man raised in Riga under the communists with one dream in life, to come to Eretz Yisrael, something that we could do so easily. He attempted to hijack a plane with a number of others. The KGB was in on it. The rest, of course, is history. I only will tell you, the night that Joseph arrived in Eretz Yisrael was one of our greatest moments in the 42 plus years that we have lived al Admat HaKodesh. And I'll tell you why. Joseph came out of the Gulag. Brankman finally was the Makkah Patish, Echter Brankman, and I wanted to pay respects to him. An assimilated Jew, but a Jew has come back somewhat. And he got him, he redeemed him at the end. And here it is, Thursday, Yosef Mendelovich arrives, and the TV crews all want to interview him. And Yosef asked them, and mind you, where he is coming from, what he knows, what he's learned. And Yosef asked them, when will this be shown? And they tell him, Friday night on television. It's too late to show tonight. And Yosef refuses to be interviewed because he didn't want Chilul Shabbos to come about because of his arrival. Just think about that. And then this young man wants to walk to Yerushalayim from Lud, from the airport. And they plead with him, Yosef, you're looking at a map, it looks very close. It's going to take very long days. And finally, he agrees to get in the car, and where Ginat Sakharov is today, where you enter Jerusalem and get the big welcome, I believe, where you turn off the Hanof, that's where Yosef jumped out of the car and started walking. Now, I don't know if you know this, Rabbi Yosef, but the Israeli radio was broadcasting while you were walking where you were up to in your walk. And if you recall, at each block, hundreds joined you, thousands joined you. By the time you reached the kotel, it was close to midnight, as I recall. There were tens of thousands rejoicing with you, my humble family included. And as you recall, we're closing a circuit today. A week and a half later, you made your first public appearance in Heichal Shlomo, and I introduced you and translated from your Hebrew into English for the group of ladies from Canada. My dear friends, it is a moment in time. Harab Yosef Mendelovich.
אני ברשותכם לדבר עברית, בסדר? קודם כל אני לא ציפיתי פה למחמאות, באתי ההפך, אז כאילו זה לא היה. ואני חושב שהרב רקפת לימד אותנו מה שצריך להגיד לו מהשיעור שהוא סיפר על מה שהעביר הרב סולובייצ'יק על רבי טרפון. ובפירוש של הרב אברהם יצחק הכהן קוק אנחנו אומרים לך, אתה עוד לא עשית שום דבר, זה לא מספיק. אז זה צריך להמשיך, כי בוודאי הנשמה הזאת הגדולה, עם הכישרון הזה, לא רק להיות נפש גדולה, אבל לדעת גם לבטא את הנפש הגדולה, בצורה כל כך ציורית. אני לא פגשתי אדם כזה שגם הנפש, אומרים נפש ממלמלה, אבל זה הנפש המלמלה. זאת אומרת, כל הנפש, וכך זה נשמע, זה צריך להמשיך ולדבר ולהופיע, ובוודאי הספר הזה הוא הביטוי של הכישרון, של החוכמה, של הנשמה הטובה היהודית, ואני כבר אמרתי שצריך לתרגם ודאי לשפה העברית, וודאי גם לרוסית. אני לא יודע, זה המון כסף, אבל חייבים. כי הדבר הזה אסור שהוא יישאר רק לציבור דוברי אנגלית, למרות שזה מאוד חשוב. ואני עוד רוצה להגיד דבר אחד. ודאי, החלק, מה שכתוב על יהדות רוסיה, זה מאוד חשוב ומעניין ומסקרן, אבל אותי אישית מעניין יותר החלק על החיים שם בהריסה בתחילת הדרך בארצות הברית. כי אני כל פעם שאלתי את עצמי, מאיפה המתיקות הזאת? מאיפה הטוב הלב הזה? מאיפה הנשמה היהודית הזאת של יהודי אמריקה? ואמרתי לאשתי לא פעם אחת, הם הנציגים האותנטיים של יהדות רוסיה שלפני 100 שנה. והם, כאשר אני באתי לאמריקה ושאני פוגש, אני מרגיש שזה המשך האותנטי. ככה, כאלו אנשים טובי לב, כאלו יהודים אמיתיים, כאלו חמים, זה יהודי אמריקה. וחייב להמשיך ולגדל ולהמשיך את הדורות האלו, כי יש דברים שגם במדינת ישראל ובארץ ישראל לא הכל שלם, את החלק הזה של החום, של הטוב לב, של הפתיחות, של הרצון לעזור, צריך עוד להמשיך ולתרום. ואולי בדרך זה שנביא אותם 500,000 או יותר יהודי אמריקה, פה זה יהיה תוספת ראויה, בוודאי בידי הספר הזה, ש8,000 אנשים שקראו, ויהיה 80,000 ויותר ויותר, כי זה ספר הגאולה, שהוא יש לו כוח לחמם את הלב, ולהקים יהודי ולהביא אותו לארץ ישראל, לתורת ישראל ולאהבת מדינת ישראל. כפי שאמר הרב אהרון, אנחנו באמת נפגשנו כמעט פה, בבניין הזה, ואולי זה היה הזיכרון הראשון שלי ממש לפגוש מישהו מארץ ישראל, שם בפגישה הזאת עם נשות אמונה, אמרתי, איזה יהודי כזה, הוא כזה זריז, הוא כל כך הרבה מדבר, איזה נפש מיוחדת. ככה אני זוכר אותו, ואני שמח שאמרו לו הרבה שנה, רק 30 שנה, והוא נשאר בדיוק ככה, עד 120 ופלוס פלוס פלוס.
רק צריך להגיד שהתקטנתם תלמידה שלי.
כן, זה גם...
זה מאוד חשוב.
כן, ודאי. אשתי קטי ספגה מהרבה תורת ארץ ישראל. אבל לצערי, מה שאני לא יכול להגיד, באמת שואלים אותי לפעמים מאנשים שהיו שליחים של הרב אהרון שהגיעו לרוסיה, הם פגשו אותך ברוסיה? אז לצערי זה אני לא יכול להגיד, כי כאשר אני הייתי שם כמעט ולא היה שליחים, זה היה בשנות ה-60, היו קצת, זה לא היה באותו היקף, והייתי אומר שאני הבנתי שהתחלתי את השליחות, הקשר ישירון של אריה קרול ב-1980. אז אני כבר הייתי שנה לפני שחרור, ואולי אני אתרום איזה סיפור קטן מהחיים שלי. אני חשבתי מה עשיתי ב-1980, בזמן שאתה התכננת לעשות את השליחות הגדולה והחשובה, גם אני עשיתי איזושהי שליחות ב-1980, במחנה שהייתי גילו אוסף ספרים, ספרי קודש, ספוירים, משהו מספוירים. ככה לימדו אני, שאני באתי פעם ראשונה לאנגליה, לארצות הברית, אמרתי בוקס. אמרו איזה בוקס? ספוירים. אז מצא אצלי המזוודה של ספורים והחרימו ממני. ואני אמרתי, מה אני יכול לעשות? הם לקחו ממני ואומרים שזה תעמולה אנטי-סובייטית, ואני אומר להם, לא, זה נכתב לפני שהייתה רוסיה, וזה יישאר אחרי שכבר לא תהיה ברית המועצות, ולא האמינו החרימו. אז ברוך השם, אני סיפור גדול, אבל היה לי כוח להחליט שאני עושה שביתת רעב, שלדרוש שיחזירו את הספרים. ואמרתי ככה, שביתת רעב, למה אני צריך בשביל הגויים לייסר את עצמי? אני צריך שיהיה בזה איזה עניין של קדושה. אז אמרתי, הרבה שנים לא עשיתי תעניות, ימי כיפורים, אז הנה איזו הזדמנות בשבילי להחזיר לקדוש ברוך הוא את כל מה שאני לא עשיתי, תשעה באב וכל הדברים האלו. אז אמרתי, פחות או יותר מהיום אני יכול להחזיר לקדוש ברוך הוא את כל מה שצריך. ואני צריך להגיד שזה מאוד עזר לי, כי דבר אחד זה שאתה עושה איזה מחאה נגד הגויים, ודבר שני, כל דבר שיהודי עושה לעם ישראל, קדוש ברוך הוא, בסוף זה עוזר גם לכולם, אנחנו יודעים את זה. וכולם יודעים שהתנועת הגאולה, שהרבה יהודים טובים השתתפו באמריקה, בארץ וברוסיה למען השלח את עמי, בסוף שבר את המשטר הסובייטי וכל הגויים קיבלו את החופש. הם לא כל כך רוצים להודות בזה, אבל זו האמת הגדולה. שעם ישראל בזה ביטא את המשמעות אור לגויים. ומשמעות פשוטה מאוד שבולשביקים עשו את המהפכה והיו יהודים בולשביקים שהם רצו לעשות טוב הם עשו רע. כאשר יהודים טורחים לגויים, לעמים אחרים הם רק מזיקים. כאשר הם משתדלים לעשות טוב לעם ישראל, אז הם נתיבים עם כל העולם כולו. וככה היה לי גם בשביתת רעב, וככה הצלחתי בדרך לא דרך להעביר את הידיעה שביתת הרעב דרך עידה נודל שהייתה במוסקבה, והיא העבירה את זה לארצות הברית. היה בארצות הברית אז נציג של באום בוועדת זכויות האדם, סנטר יהודי, סנטר קמפלמן. וכאשר שם הרוסים בוועדת זכויות האדם דיברו על הפרות זכויות האדם בארץ ישראל שפה מפרים, אז קם הסנטר קמפלמן ואומר, על מה אתם מדברים הרוסים? יש בחור אחד אצלכם בכלא שהוא הולך למות, הוא כבר לא אוכל 50 יום, כי אתם לא נותנים לו לקרוא את הבייבל, את הספר תנ"ך. אז זה אתם רוצים ללמד אותנו מה זה זכויות האדם? אז הוא רץ להתקשר למוסקבה ולשאול, באמת יש דבר כזה? אז אמרו, יש פה אחד משוגע כזה וזה. הוא אומר, תפסיקו, זה מה זה מזיק, אני עכשיו כבר לא יכול לדבר שום דבר. פתאום ככה היה, אני כבר נבח שוכב, אין לי כוח. פתאום נכנס מפקד המחנה, איזה קצין רוסי כזה גבוה, ואומר לי, אתה ממשיך להילחם נגד המדינה שלנו, אז זה כזה פרדוקס, הוא כזה גבוה וחזק ואני כבר אין לי כוח. אבל אני הבנתי שיהודי אמריקה עזרו לי, זה הגיע לשמה, אז אמרתי, תראה, אני לא רוצה שום דבר לברית המועצות, אני רק רוצה שתיתנו לי אפשרות להיות יהודי ולקרוא את הספרים שלי. אז הוא אמר, בסדר, כי זה לא היה בכוחי. ושאני, אחרי התענית הזה, יצאתי, היה כזה כלא פנימי בתוך המחנה, יצאתי עם חלק מהספרים, את הכל הם לא נתנו לי, חלק מהספרים נתנו. החברים שלי, האסירים פוליטיים מהעמים האחרים, חיכו שאולי יוציאו אותי כבר באלונקה, מתו חצי מת, פתאום הם רואים, אני יוצא עם הספרים. אז הם אמרו לי, איך זה קרה שאתה הצלחת? אמרתי, לא אני הצלחתי. זה יהודים תמיד עוזרים אחד לשני, ובזכות זה שעם ישראל ערבים זה בזה, אז בזכות זה אני הצלחתי וניצחתי. והם אמרו, כן, אנחנו יהודים. אתם יהודים, עם מיוחד. אתם תמיד עוזרים זה לזה. אז צריך לדעת, ודאי זה לא תמיד, אבל לרוב העמים זה בכלל לא קיים. ואצלנו, כל עוד שיש הרב רקפת ואתם ואנשים טובים, אנחנו באמת, זה המיוחד שלנו, כך אנחנו צריכים להמשיך. אז זה נאמר בפרשת שבוע, נאמר הנסתרות להשם והנגלות להשם, שאם תגידו מה אנחנו יודעים, אולי יש פה יהודים שהם לא בסדר, אתם חייבים לבאר ולברר את כל הרע. יש מצווה עלינו לא להיות אנוכיים, להיות מעורבים ולדאוג לכלל ישראל, לחשוב על כל יהודי, מה אפשר לעשות בשבילו, מכיוון שאנחנו לא רק עם אחד, אנחנו גוף אחד בלב אחד. כי בהמשך לסיפור עם מם לא סופי, אז תסתכל אצלי בספר במבצע חתונה, כתובה הזמנה לחתונה לאחותי, לחתונה של אחותי שהייתה מיד אחרי מלחמת ששת הימים שציינתי עוד בריגה. תספור כמה שם טעויות יש באותיות, כן? אז אנחנו תמיד לומדים, אנחנו תמיד באולפן וממשיכים. וזכות גדולה לי לדבר היום ולהגיד גם הספר זה אתם. זה לא הספר אישי, שם הגורל, שם הטוב שאתם עשיתם. ולכן זכות גדולה לי להודות לכם בשם יהדות רוסיה, כמה שאני יכול לייצג, על הדברים טובים שאתם גידלתם, תלמידי חכמים, כאלו אנשים טובים ומתוקים, ושחיינו וקיימנו והגענו על זה. הלוואי שיהיה יותר ויותר תלמידים לרב רקפת שיבואו וילמדו ממנו כמו שלמדו יהודים ברוסיה במחתרת, זוכרים את זה, והתורה שהוא קיבל, שקיבלו ממנו שמה בגלות ברוסיה, ממשיכים להפיץ ולקרב, ויום גדול בא עוד מעט, כולם יתקבצו לחג, וזה יהיה רק ההתחלה. תודה רבה.
תודה רבה. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for participating in this very, very special evening. I would like to close the evening just by saying that while I apologize, especially for those of you who are seated in the back, for some of the noise that you heard on the outside, as Rabbi Rakefet pointed out, that every Rebbe and every Jew should have two ears. With one ear, and maybe with more than one, we heard much of the story of the past of Rabbi Rakefet and his work that should continue together with his dear wife, Rebbetzin Malka, if I can call her by her first name, for many, many more years. And with the other ear, we heard the children outside that represent our future. So we bring the two together. You will be able to purchase the book that Rabbi Rakefet will be happy to sign in the back. We have drinks there, and in 4 minutes, and you know when I say 4 minutes, I mean 4 minutes, in the Sephardic shul to my left, we will have a minyan for Maghrib. Thank you very much. Tiva v'chatima tova l'kolam.
It's nice. It's very nice.
Oh, you're my brother. Joe.
How are you? Square, I'll get you a copy, from the video. Square.